A dark forest shrouded in mist, a relentless storm pounding from above, and an army of 20,000 Roman soldiers marching unknowingly toward their doom. This is the story of Arminius, the man who betrayed Rome to free his people, and forever altered the course of history. In the 1st century after Christ, Rome dominated the known world. Their legions were unstoppable. Their empire stretched across 3 continents, and their very name inspired fear and awe. But deep in the dense, foreboding forests of Germania, a young warrior, raised in the heart of Rome itself, was preparing to deliver a blow that would shake the mighty empire to its core. Arminius, known to the Germans as Hermann, wasn't just another tribal leader rising against Roman oppression. He was a legend in the making. The stage was set for one of history's most stunning betrayals. Trained in Roman military tactics, fluent in Latin, and trusted by Rome's generals, Arminius possessed knowledge no Germanic warrior had before him. He understood Roman formations, their weaknesses, and most importantly, their overwhelming confidence in their own superiority. This knowledge would become their undoing in the shadow of the ancient trees. What happened in that forest would echo through the centuries. A massacre so complete that Emperor Augustus would reportedly bang his head against the walls of his palace, crying out in anguish, "Varus, give me back my legions!" The defeat was not just military, it was psychological, a wound to Rome's sense of invincibility that would never fully heal. If you love history and want to uncover the secrets of great empires, like this video, subscribe to Legacy of Empires and don't miss a single episode of this epic saga. Join us as we delve into the mind of the man who changed the fate of an entire continent with a single devastating ambush. Born around 17 years before Christ, Arminius entered a world divided between Roman ambition and Germanic tradition. While still a boy, he was handed over to Rome as a hostage, a common practice the Romans employed to civilize those they called barbarians. Young sons of tribal leaders were taken from their homes and immersed in Roman culture, creating loyal allies who would one day return to govern their people in Rome's interest. For Arminius, this meant leaving behind the misty forests and tribal gatherings of his Cherusci people. Imagine a young boy, perhaps no more than 10 years old, saying farewell to everything familiar, his family's wooden longhouse, the hunting grounds where he'd taken his first steps toward manhood, the sacred groves where tribal elders shared ancient stories. In their place, the marble columns, paved roads, and imposing architecture of the mightiest empire on earth. In Rome, Arminius thrived. He learned not just Latin, but the sophisticated art of Roman warfare, how legions moved as a single body, how they built fortifications that could withstand any assault, how discipline and organization could overcome superior numbers. He didn't just study these tactics, he lived them, rising through the ranks to become a tribunus militum, a military tribune, a remarkable achievement for someone Romans considered a foreigner. He wore Roman armor, commanded Roman soldiers, and to all appearances became the perfect example of Rome's civilizing influence. The Romans looked at Arminius and saw success, a barbarian transformed into a proper Roman citizen, proof that their ways were superior. Arminius walked through Rome's forums, dined with patrician families, and perhaps even met Emperor Augustus himself. He gained citizenship, the ultimate mark of acceptance. But beneath the Roman toga beat the heart of a Cheruscan warrior. In quiet moments, did he remember the taste of mead shared around tribal fires? Did he recall the songs of his people when hearing Roman lyres? We cannot know for certain what stirred in his mind, but this we do know. While his body was in Rome, his spirit remained with his people. And when word reached him that Publius Quintilius Varus, the new governor of Germania, planned to transform his homeland into just another Roman province, complete with taxes, enslavement, and the crushing of tribal traditions, something awoke in Arminius. The Romans had taught him to be a soldier, to think strategically, to understand the weaknesses of even the mightiest force. Now he would use those very lessons against his teachers. The son of two worlds made his choice. He would return to Germania not as Rome's representative, but as its most dangerous enemy, a man who knew exactly how to bring the eagles of Rome crashing down. In the year 9 after Christ, the Roman governor Publius Quintilius Varus believed he had Germania firmly under control. A nobleman of distinguished family with connections to Emperor Augustus himself, Varus had previously governed the wealthy province of Syria, where he had earned a reputation for both efficiency and cruelty. Now tasked with transforming the wild frontier of Germania into a tax-paying Roman province, he relied heavily on his trusted advisor, Arminius. "The young German is Roman in all but birth," Varus would tell his officers, completely blind to the storm gathering around him. What the governor didn't know was that Arminius had been secretly moving through the forests at night, from tribe to tribe, village to village. The Germanic peoples had long been divided, fighting amongst themselves as much as against Rome, but Arminius possessed something no Germanic leader before him had: intimate knowledge of Rome's military tactics and, more importantly, its weaknesses. "The Romans are not gods," he would whisper to rival chieftains under the cover of darkness. "They bleed like us, they die like us, and I know exactly how to make them fall." Slowly, painstakingly, he convinced tribe after tribe to set aside ancient feuds and unite against the common enemy. Late summer, year 9. Varus received reports of a small uprising in a distant corner of Germania. "Nothing serious," Arminius assured him. "Just a minor tribal dispute that required Roman attention. The perfect opportunity to display Roman power before winter arrived." Trusting his advisor completely, Varus ordered 3 full legions, the 17th, 18th, and 19th, to march northeast. Approximately 20,000 men, including auxiliary troops and camp followers, snaked through the German countryside. Arminius, citing reconnaissance duties, rode ahead with his Germanic cavalrymen. In reality, he was giving final instructions to thousands of warriors hidden in the forests ahead. The Romans, following Arminius's suggested route, found themselves on a narrow path through the Teutoburg Forest, a nightmarish terrain of dense woods, boggy ground, and steep ravines. The legions stretched out for miles, unable to maintain their usual tight formations. Then came the rain. A torrential downpour turned the forest floor into a slippery quagmire. Roman shields grew waterlogged and heavy. Bowstrings became useless. And still, the legions trudged forward, unaware that thousands of eyes watched them from the trees. The attack, when it came, was unlike anything Rome had experienced before. No honorable challenge in open field, no formal battle lines, just the sudden howl of Germanic war cries and a hail of spears from the forest shadows. The Romans, perfect fighting machines in open battles, found themselves in a hunter's trap. Unable to maneuver, unable to see their attackers clearly, the mighty legions began to splinter. For 3 blood-soaked days, the massacre continued. The Romans fought desperately, trying to establish defensive positions each night, only to be overwhelmed again at dawn. Varus, witnessing his army disintegrating around him and understanding too late Arminius's betrayal, fell on his own sword rather than face capture. By the battle's end, an unthinkable reality emerged. 3 entire Roman legions, the finest fighting force in the ancient world, had been completely destroyed. The forest floor was carpeted with Roman dead. Equipment, weapons, and armor worth a king's ransom lay abandoned in the mud. And most devastating of all for Roman pride, the 3 golden eagles, sacred standards that represented the very soul of each legion, had been captured by Germanic hands. Here's something remarkable. Those 3 eagles, symbols of Rome's military might, were never recovered. For Romans, this wasn't just the loss of valuable military emblems. It was a spiritual catastrophe, as if pieces of Rome's divine blessing had been torn away. The news reached Emperor Augustus in Rome, striking him like a physical blow. The man who had transformed Rome from a republic to an empire, who had brought unprecedented peace and prosperity, collapsed into grief and rage. For months afterward, he would reportedly bang his head against the walls of his palace, crying out, "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions!" The emperor even let his hair and beard grow as signs of deep mourning, something Romans only did in times of profound grief. Such was the psychological impact of Arminius's trap that Augustus immediately ordered Romans living in Germanic territories to retreat behind the Rhine River. The numbers 17, 18, and 19 were never again assigned to new Roman legions, an eternal memorial to the disaster in the Teutoburg Forest. Victory has its price. For Arminius, the hero of Teutoburg Forest, that price would be paid in blood, not just Roman blood, but his own family's. In the aftermath of his stunning triumph, Arminius might have expected to unite all Germania under his leadership. After all, he had accomplished the impossible, humbling mighty Rome and securing freedom for his people. Yet the very independence he fought for would become his greatest challenge. The Germanic tribes cherished their autonomy too deeply to simply bow to a new master, even one who had delivered them from Roman chains. Perhaps the most painful division occurred within Arminius's own family. His brother Flavus, whose name means the blonde in Latin, had also been sent to Rome as a hostage in their youth. But unlike Arminius, Flavus embraced Roman ways completely and chose loyalty to the empire over ties of blood. While Arminius plotted Rome's defeat, Flavus rose through the ranks of the Roman military, eventually losing an eye in service to the empire. 6 years after the Teutoburg massacre, the brothers would face each other across the Weser River. Arminius commanding Germanic warriors, Flavus accompanying the Roman general Germanicus on a punitive expedition. Roman historians recorded their shouted exchange. Standing on opposite banks, they hurled accusations at each other. Arminius calling his brother a traitor to their people, Flavus condemning Arminius for betraying Rome's generosity. Blood ties meant nothing now. They had become symbols of the impossible choice forced upon Germanic nobles caught between worlds. The Roman campaigns of revenge were fierce. Germanicus recovered one of the lost eagle standards and gave proper burial to the bones of Varus's legions, still scattered through the forest years after the battle. He even captured Arminius's pregnant wife, Thusnelda, parading her through Rome's streets in chains before she gave birth to a son the Romans would raise in captivity. But despite these victories, Rome could never re-establish permanent control east of the Rhine River. Arminius's victory had been too complete, the psychological blow too devastating. Did you know that Rome never again seriously attempted to conquer Germania after this defeat? The Rhine River became the permanent northeastern frontier of the empire, a boundary that would influence European cultural and linguistic divisions for thousands of years to come. Latin-based languages to the west and south, Germanic languages to the north and east, a divide still visible on language maps today. For Arminius, personal tragedy followed his military triumph. Despite his efforts to unite the tribes, old jealousies and power struggles resurfaced. Germanic chieftains who had once followed him began to fear his growing influence. Why replace Roman masters with one of their own? In the year 21 after Christ, just 12 years after his greatest victory, Arminius was assassinated by members of his own extended family, who feared he aimed to become king. The man who saved Germania from Rome could not save himself from Germania. Perhaps that is the ultimate irony. The freedom he won for his people included their freedom to reject his leadership. His death at age 37 cut short what might have been an even more remarkable career. Would he have united the Germanic peoples into a nation that could rival Rome? We can only speculate. Even in death, Arminius remained a divisive figure. To Romans like the historian Tacitus, he was undoubtedly Germania's liberator, despite being their enemy. To Germanic tribes, he became a legendary hero, even as they killed him. Centuries later, 19th century Germans would resurrect his memory as a national symbol, erecting the massive Hermann's Denkmal monument that still stands today in the Teutoburg region. So what do you think? Did you know that Rome never again invaded Germania after this crushing defeat? If you're enjoying this historical journey, hit that like button, share this video, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Would you have betrayed Rome as Arminius did? Was he a traitor or a liberator? The line between hero and villain often depends on which side of history or which side of the river you're standing on. Think about this for a moment. Without Arminius, would we recognize Europe as we know it today? The answer is likely no. His victory in the Teutoburg Forest didn't just stop a Roman army, it permanently redefined the map of an entire continent. Had Arminius never existed, or had he remained loyal to Rome, Germania would almost certainly have become just another Roman province. The disciplined legions would have marched eastward, building their straight roads, establishing colonial towns, and imposing Latin language and customs on the Germanic tribes. The Rhine River would have been just another waterway within the empire, not a boundary. Instead, his victory created a cultural and political frontier that would define Europe for the next 2,000 years. South of this line, Roman influence remained dominant. Latin languages took root, Roman law became the foundation of governance, and even Christianity would spread through Roman pathways. North and east of this boundary, Germanic cultures continued to develop independently, with their own languages, legal traditions, and later distinctive approaches to Christianity. You can still see this division on maps today. Look at the languages of modern Europe. Romance languages like French, Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese flourish, where Rome's influence remained strongest. Germanic languages like German, Dutch, English, and the Scandinavian tongues dominate where Arminius prevented Roman conquest. That linguistic border largely follows the very frontier established by his victory. The cultural impact extends far beyond language. Different architectural styles, legal systems, even approaches to government can be traced back to this ancient division. When the Western Roman Empire finally collapsed in the 5th century after Christ, it was largely Germanic peoples, the descendants of those Arminius had kept free, who moved into the power vacuum and established the kingdoms that would eventually evolve into modern European nations. Perhaps most fascinating is how Arminius himself was remembered or forgotten, then rediscovered when needed most. For over 1,000 years after his death, his story faded into obscurity. But in the 19th century, as Germans sought to create a unified national identity, they resurrected Arminius, or Hermann as they called him, as the perfect national hero. In 1875, a colossal monument was unveiled in the Teutoburg region, the Hermann's Denkmal. This 90-foot-tall statue depicts Arminius raising his sword to the sky, a defiant symbol of Germanic resistance against foreign domination. It wasn't just a historical monument, but a political statement during the birth of the modern German nation. Poets wrote about him, composers created music celebrating his victory, and historians elevated him to mythical status. The 19th century Germans saw in Arminius what they needed, a unifier of disparate Germanic tribes against outside powers. His image appeared on everything from postcards to beer steins, making him a household name after nearly 2 millennia of obscurity. Of course, this nationalistic interpretation would later be twisted in disturbing ways during the 20th century, when the Nazi regime appropriated Arminius as a symbol of German racial purity, resisting foreign corruption. This dark chapter reminds us how historical figures can be manipulated for political purposes far removed from their actual lives and contexts. Today, a more balanced view prevails. Historians recognize Arminius not as a simple nationalist hero, but as a complex figure navigating between cultures, making fateful choices that reverberated through time. Modern Germans acknowledge both his historical importance and the dangers of mythologizing the past. What remains undeniable is that this one man, this son of the forest who learned Rome's ways only to use them against his teachers, altered the course of history. The border he created with blood and iron in that misty forest would shape language, culture, religion, and politics for thousands of years. Look around at modern Europe. Its diversity of languages, its distinctive northern and southern cultural traditions, even the historical tensions between Latin and Germanic peoples, all bear the fingerprints of Arminius's choice. Few individuals can claim to have left such a permanent mark on world geography and cultural development. So next time you look at a map of Europe, remember that its contours were shaped not just by mountains and rivers, but by the decisions of a young man who stood between two worlds and chose to fight for his people's freedom. One person truly can change the destiny of a continent. So was Arminius a hero or a traitor? The answer depends entirely on which side of history you stand. To Rome, he was the ultimate betrayer, a man they had educated, elevated and trusted, who used their own tactics against them in a massacre that haunted the empire for generations. The poet Ovid, writing from exile during this period, captured the Roman sentiment perfectly when he lamented how loyalty and faith have fled from the world. For Romans, Arminius embodied that faithlessness. But to the Germanic peoples, he was something else entirely, a liberator who sacrificed privilege and power to preserve their way of life. A man who understood that freedom, even with its hardships, was preferable to the comfortable slavery Rome offered. His name would eventually become synonymous with Germanic independence and courage. History rarely gives us simple heroes or villains, and Arminius stands as one of its most fascinating grey areas. He was neither purely noble nor purely treacherous, just a man making an impossible choice between two identities, two loyalties, two possible futures. Perhaps what makes his story so compelling even 2,000 years later is how it forces us to question our own understanding of loyalty. Arminius chose loyalty to his blood and homeland over loyalty to the empire that had given him status and opportunity. His decision reminds us that sometimes the bonds of culture and community run deeper than any oath to distant powers, and the consequences? They echo through history to this day. The Rhine River border established by Arminius's victory created a cultural division that shaped European development for centuries. Some historians even argue that without Arminius, there might never have been a distinct German culture or nation, just another outpost of Latin civilization. One man's choice, for better or worse, altered the destiny of millions yet unborn. His story also offers a humbling reminder to empires of every age. No matter how invincible you seem, no matter how superior your technology or training, underestimating the human desire for freedom is always a fatal mistake. Rome learned this lesson in the blood-soaked mud of Teutoburg Forest. Other empires would learn it again and again throughout history. There's a reason why, nearly 2 millennia after his death, the Germans built that massive statue of Arminius in the Teutoburg region, his sword raised high against the sky, his gaze fixed defiantly toward the west. Not just to commemorate a battle long past, but to capture something timeless about the human spirit and its yearning for self-determination. If you've enjoyed this journey into one of history's most dramatic turning points, there's much more where this came from. The ancient world was filled with these pivotal moments, battles, betrayals, and bold decisions that shaped our modern world in ways we rarely stop to consider. Hit that like button right now if you want to see more stories from the ancient world that still resonate today. Share this video with someone who appreciates how history shapes our present. And most importantly, subscribe to Legacy of Empires and ring that notification bell to join us for our next expedition into the ancient past. From Alexander's conquests to Caesar's ambitions, from the rise of world religions to the fall of mighty civilizations, the ancient world offers endless lessons for those willing to listen. And we're just getting started. This is Legacy of Empires, where yesterday's decisions explain today's world. Until next time, remember that history isn't just about the past. It's about understanding who we are and where we might be heading.